It's showtime.
Target designated.
Nuclear launch detected. Nuclear attack.
Prepare to die.
Energy completely researched.
Non-vigilant.
Deck the halls with hordes of lurkers. 'Tis a season to be zergly. Wow. So that means we're moving on to Fantasy versus Hydra. I got little drops of saliva on my pop filter. Oh well. But yeah, it's a good day to be a Zerg fan, that's for sure. Let's see if Fantasy can buck that trend and save face for the other couple of races that are hanging their head in embarrassment today. But he is going to be playing Hydra on Pathfinder. And actually, this is an extremely high-stakes matchup. I kind of lied in the last game in this group. I think it was Free versus Fantasy when I said that that matchup wasn't high-stakes, because it was. And it meant that Modesty moves out into the round of 8, and Free does not. So Free guaranteed knocked out, and Modesty guaranteed in the round of 8. And this matchup right here, the winner of this matchup, will move into the round of 8. Doesn't get much more high stakes than that. So this should be stellar. A stellar matchup. But here we go. Except up at the 12 o'clock position in Beige is Hydra. Scouting down to the 5 o'clock, the wrong direction. That means down at the 8 o'clock and whatever is Fantasy. Ah, good old Fantasy. Yeah, Fantasy was on a ridiculous tear there for a while. Had about 10 wins in a row, lost a bunch. But he's starting winning again. I think he won a couple of games recently in the Pro League. So he's picking himself back up again to the best of his ability. Lost an embarrassing game against Zelos. I mean, Zelos barely plays on Ace these days. And he still won the TVT against Fantasy. He might have been practicing that whole downtime where he wasn't playing to fight Fantasy. We'll never know, but... Yep, Fantasy, let's see if he can do it. Fantasy used to have... Well, I guess he still does have just Legendary versus Zerg. It's not always perfect. In fact, it's often very unperfect, but it's always entertaining to watch because he refuses to go for standard play. Fantasy has said multiple times in interviews that I just can't go for standard play. It doesn't fit. It's like wearing someone else's shoes. I can't do it. But of course, he went for non-standard in every single game versus Jaedong in the finals they had. 2 of those worked out, the first 2. But Jaedong ended up catching on and took down a Fantasy. He was so close to finally getting a gold, but Jaedong took him down a level. And after that, Fantasy hasn't really recovered. Of course, he won his game in the Pro League finals. Of course, that was a fantastic win for Fantasy. But Fantasy in individual leagues, as far as individual leagues go, he hasn't really recovered from that point. Might be another Silver Surfer in history. That guy looks like a surfer right there. Hey, dude. Got the blonde hair. I'm sure the Koreans don't see blonde hair very much, except for those Korean K-pop singers who actually dye their hair blonde. That looks so weird. Don't do that. But okay. Let's get some predictions from the Nukenites. We have a lot of Fantasy fans here, as Hydra is trying desperately to take down an SCV that's walling off inside the natural, sorry. But here's another one. Here's the first one. From Afro at Sea, writes, "Go Fantasy! This time you make it." So he's behind you, Fantasy. Here's another one from Mr. Zythum42, Zithum or something, writes, "Vultures in round of 8, please. Fantasy to move out." Another one from Lemon Bone writes, "I have a feeling we will see Fantasy versus Stork in the final. LOL." There's a third hatchery coming up for Hydra. He sees that this is a mech build because Fantasy is throwing down a very early factory. But of course, this doesn't mean he's going to go straight into mech. Of course, I haven't seen mech in a very long time from a Terran player, but he is definitely going to start off with some vulture harassment. And Hydra will want to be mindful and prepared for that, going straight through the egg by clicking on the mineral. That's a cute little trick they used to great effect on the map Plasma, when they had just eggs all over the place that you could only get through if you clicked on the mineral patch. There's the third hatchery already up, and there comes the extractor for Hydra. This is an interesting opening. I haven't really seen a Zerg player go for 3 hatcheries before, extractor even. Alright, the first vulture going to be popping out for Fantasy soon. I'd say pretty soon, as he's going to try to sneak in, get some drone kills. But that was scouted, so Hydra did get a nice drone scout going. Building the Hydralisk Den first, which is the smart thing to do against this type of a build. He's probably expecting a 2 starport build, 2-port Wraith. But the armory on the way for Fantasy, what? Yeah, this could be straight up mech. Wow, I haven't seen straight up mech forever. I do hope he goes for that. Of course, knowing Fantasy, he might be going for Valkyries as well. That's another one of his favorite units. But okay, he's going to try to sneak up with his vulture, get something done. Most likely not going to be able to get anything done. And I think he knows that. He's bypassing the natural completely, looking around for any third base to see if he can harass that. If Hydra had built a third base, he would have an extremely difficult time protecting it at the moment. Alright, now that Fantasy's checking around for the third base, he didn't see it, so he's going to go to the natural, see if he can get anything done there. Nope, he sees that the creep is extended, which means that the sunken colony is there, and he won't be able to get anything done. But he can hang outside the natural and snipe any Zerglings that try to pop out, or any drones that go out to throw down the third base. So that vulture is going to be a little bit annoying outside the natural. And a Goliath, I saw a Goliath from Fantasy. This is straight up mech, a straight up mech build. I haven't seen this in a very long time, but I'm sure that some Terran players have used it in the Pro League. I'm imagining some viewers like, oh, I just saw that build, Nuke, what are you talking about? But I haven't seen it in a while, but alright. Some turrets coming up. Fantasy knows he needs some pretty sturdy anti-air as he's building up his Goliath army. Of course, the strength of a mech build is, once you get the upgrades for the mech, it's nearly impossible to stop as a Zerg. But it is an extremely weak build early on in the game, and Hydra knows that. He's coming down with his Hydras, ironically, to push the front, and I don't think Fantasy has enough to deal with this at all. He has 2 Goliaths, and he has a bunker at the front to help himself defend, but I don't think that's going to be enough as Hydra pushes down with his Hydralisks, and I think he's going to put on the pressure, try to break through the front as quickly as he can. Yeah, he's going out in here, sniping the bunker. The bunker's going to go down. Fantasy does not get enough SCVs repairing that. Only a couple of Goliaths now, and Fantasy's going to have to throw all of his SCVs at the front to protect himself as he's building up his Hydralisk, loses a supply depot at the front. Oh, Fantasy going to lose another supply depot as he's doing his best. Hydra's coming in, trying to snipe the Goliath. There is a Saving Grace tank. He's got to protect that tank, though. If the tank goes down, this is going to be it for Fantasy. He loses a lot of SCVs at the front. So Hydra is getting a lot of economic damage, even if he can't take down everything. Trying to push the front and take down that tank. Unsuccessful in doing that. That was an unsuccessful attack. Probably could have sniped some more SCVs in that time, but now Fantasy is going to be safe for the time being. Hydra's going to group up a few more Hydras outside of Fantasy's natural. But Fantasy lost quite a bit in that attack. A lot of SCVs, a couple of supply depots. That was enough to put him behind. But now Hydra is going to have to expand everywhere. That is the best course of action to take. What is Fantasy doing down here? He's building a supply depot at the 5 o'clock. He's hiding a supply depot. Maybe he's so traumatized by losing the supply depots at the front. He's like, yeah, I don't want you to take down anymore. I'm going to hide them. Of course, he might just be trying to free up some space inside of his main and his natural expansion and hide buildings elsewhere. But Fantasy, another wave of attack from Hydra is pushing through. There is still a bunker at the front. Sniping of the tank. The tank goes down, but there is another Saving Grace tank. Oh, the tank saving Fantasy in this game. Popping out at just the right time, and that tank has siege mode ready, so now Hydra is going to have to transition into something else. Starport on the way for Fantasy 2, pumping from those 2 factories. He has tanks positioned. But of course, if Hydra goes for a Mutalisk tech switch, which he could definitely do, I think he'd be able to snipe some more SCVs and put Fantasy even further behind. But Fantasy doesn't have a whole lot of anti-air. He's been focusing on those tanks, getting out the tanks before he groups up more of a Goliath army. Of course, Goliaths are the cornerstone of a good mech build, because they're so damn versatile. They can attack air and ground, and once you upgrade them, they're almost impossible to beat. With the tanks in the back, getting the splash damage, that's so hard to beat. So Hydra, he had a pretty good attack timing window, and he got some pretty good damage done, but now he is transitioning into a mass expand build, which is what a Zerg needs to do against a mech Terran. So building the third base, and the main weakness of a mech build like this is the maneuverability. Fantasy building more buildings down at the 5 o'clock, just hiding them from Hydra. If that's found by Hydra, he's going to be able to take out some important buildings. But I guess that Fantasy won't need that academy much longer anyway, once he gets the scans out. But Fantasy finding some drones that are transferring, might be able to take down a couple. He takes down one. Is chased off by the rest of the Hydras. So Hydra does have his third base. Going to have to work on his fourth now, because the main weakness of a mech build, as I said, is the maneuverability. So that means the mech Terran can't move out to take down bases quickly, especially if they're working on macro. If Fantasy is going to focus on a third base, that's going to give Hydra even more time to expand out there. Okay, now he's building a Spire as well. It's good to get that kind of a double grouping of Mutas and Hydras at the same time, because the Mutas can snipe the tanks in the back as the Hydras are pushing forward, taking out the Goliaths. So I think the Hydra does have the right idea, but he's just got to keep up, because Fantasy is a very strong late-game player. And this is the build that he made himself famous with in the end crew at OSL, going up against GG Play, used a mech build. Of course, it wasn't the first time anyone had used a mech build. He used basically the kind of build that I Love UV was using in 2003. So you probably know where that build came from, as every other build probably comes from for Fantasy. The genius that is I Love UV. But, yeah, it did make Fantasy kind of famous for using the mech build and the Valkyrie builds against GG Play. GG Play did not see it coming at all. He was just dumbfounded that Fantasy went for that. And that's when Flash started going for mech too, and lost against GG Play right before Fantasy's game. So all the Terran players were kind of trying out mech, thinking that was the next big thing. But Fantasy fending off these mutas, falling into a huge turret trap, and the Science Vessel is there too to get the Irradiate. Of course, I think Irradiate is actually ready from the Science Vessel. I think it was research, but just waiting on the energy for that. But Fantasy built a lot of turrets. He has a lot of idle SCVs just sitting there too. But of course, a 2-base Terran is extremely strong. Hydra has taken his 4th base up at the 2 o'clock behind his main. So he is working on that mass expand build, getting a huge booming economy going, so he can... fans still building at that 5 o'clock. But Hydra hasn't scouted that at all, so I think he's okay with his buildings. Down at the Hidden Expo, I think the SCV's building himself a fort. But there's the Irradiate on the mutas. Hydra doing a pretty good job getting out the infected one. And sending that straight inside the main to get somewhat of a scout on what Fantasy has. But alright. Yes. As I was saying, a mass expanding Zerg can afford to throw away units, and that's important against a mech build, because you're going to be throwing away a lot of units against a mech build, no matter what happens. There's Fantasy laying some mines, all that vulture control. Gotta love those Fantasy vultures. The terrorist. I'm a terrorist. Terrorist vultures anyway. Dragging another mine into the Hydraless, and Hydra can't be feeling too good right now. He's trying to transfer some more drones to that new base. But dealing with this vulture harassment at the same time has got to be a pain, and the carapace. But the Mutalisk chasing around the rest of the vultures, so should be able to nullify that threat. But Fantasy is actually moving out. He's going to lay some mines and try to take the middle, I think. He already has his tanks kind of positioned there, ready to go. And Hydra still hasn't been able to keep up any drone saturation at this 12 o'clock, running into vultures yet again. All those pesky vultures. So he's going to need a sunken colony there at the back. No doubt in my mind that Fantasy is just going to continue to send vultures to that location. Look at how many vultures he has. That is ridiculous from Fantasy. It looks like he's preparing inside the main for a drop, which is very smart. That is the most logical thing I can think of for a Zerg player to do on this map against mech. Is to drop inside the main, kill all the production buildings. Another irradiate! Third irradiate! Taking down a lot of health on those mutas. And Fantasy has secured a nice minefield in the middle, so he's going to have a nice scout on the Mutalisks as they fly in. But Fantasy preparing to take his third base. He is macroing up heavily, and his fourth. He's building his fourth base as well. I don't know if he's going to be able to hold both, because Hydra, he has plenty of Hydras positioned to snipe command centers as they float over the everything being floated over by Fantasy. But Hydra is moving in for an attack. He has his Mutalisks in as well that are probably going to be irradiated again. But here come the Hydras. A few Overlords at the front to snipe the minefields. Coming up from the back with Hydras too. Oh, Hydra losing a bunch of Hydras. It's ridiculous to say, but he is trying to get the pincer attack the best of his ability. I don't think he's going to be able to do this. There are still tanks by that 6 o'clock position that can clean this up, and yeah, the tanks do clean it up, so not entirely successful attack from Hydra. Hydras. But alright, Hydra needs a 5th base soon. Needs to secure that 5th base and out-expand Fantasy, because Fantasy, working off of these 3, that's when a mech build really kicks into high gear, when it kicks into 3 bases. And I wish I could see the upgrades. The freaking scrolling thing at the bottom of the screen, I can't see the upgrades from either of the players. I think there's +1 spine for the Hydras, although Carapace, I'd say, is the most important upgrade when fighting off a mech build, for both Mutalisks and Hydralisks both. But Fantasy, look at this. Such an anti-drop main. He is prepared for a drop. He's saying, well, there's no way you're going to be able to defeat me without taking out all my important buildings in the main, so I will just prepare for the drop. And if Hydra does drop, which I think he might be going for, he has all of his Overlords grouped up. If he does drop, it could be suicidal for him as he's pushing through the 6 o'clock positions, trying to snipe the Science Vessel. He almost snipes the Science Vessel, but deciding to back off. Those tanks being protected by the SCV is a drop from Hydra. This could be game deciding if he drops on these mines. Of course, with the Overlords, he's going to be able to see the mines. Let's see if he's going to commit to this or not. Moving in with his Overlords, dropping right on top of the mines, everything exploding. Oh, look at that. Dead Hydras everywhere. Losing the Overlords, too. That was such a smart preparedness from Fantasy to prepare against that drop. It worked out so well, and that's just, I think that's going to clinch the game for Fantasy. That one failed drop like that, wow, that was insane. If Hydra had more bases, I don't think that would have hurt as much. But he's just now putting down his 5th. Yeah, he's got to go for his 6th base. He needs to throw down bases everywhere to fight back Fantasy, because this is insane. Fantasy does have a nice mech build going. This is his specialty, is going for mech, the mech units. That's his the best thing he can micro. Trying to fend this off with one single tank. Might be able to do it. He's within range of part of those Hydras anyway. And more Vultures going in for harassment at that 12 o'clock. Unsuccessfully, though. There are Hydras there to protect that. Can Hydra snipe the command center? He's trying to. But no, Fantasy protects it. It was in like 2 health on that command center. But he manages to repair it, get it back up. And Hydra looking extremely frustrated as he's finally getting his 5th base. So, alright, Hydra, what are you going to do now? He is working straight into Hive Tech, so he's going to have probably some Ultralisks out to help himself fight this off. Of course, Defilers would help quite a bit, but not so much against the Siege mode, taking down everything under the Dark Swarm. But Fantasy is starting to move out already. He has some troops out there, and he's grouping them up to move out. And I think he's going to try to take down a base soon. Trying to do a bit more harassment, but I think the Hydra is kind of caught on to that. Has some Hydras positioned to take down those freaking Vultures. I just can't even imagine what it must be like to play against Fantasy and deal with these freaking Vultures. Ugh, Vultures. But alright, let's see what Hydra can do. I have a feeling that Hydra's going to try to harass that inside 8 o'clock base again, since it's such an open base. And Fantasy is out of position to deal with that, with his troops out in the middle of the map. So let's see. Oh, Fantasy running into Hydras again. He had a lot of unsuccessful harassments now that the Hydra is taking his 6th base, being spotted by Fantasy's mine. So, alright, Fantasy is grouping up. He's actually going to the south side of his base. He might curl his way back up here to attack the 10 o'clock, which I do think he's going to do. Yeah, he's going up there. There are only a few Hydralists protecting that, just kind of acting as watchdogs. To the south of that 10 o'clock base. But that's the one Fantasy's going for, trying to be unpredictable. Instead of going through the wide open middle, where he could be pincer attacked. Queens! Queens. A lot of queens out for Hydra. And this is how Hydra has dealt with mech in the past, going for a queen build. Actually successfully went for a broodling build in one of his games in Pro League. Oh, that's a lot of queens. Wow. But it could be a bit too late. He's got to wait for the energy to pop up on those queens. Waiting for 150 energy takes a while, even though the queen regenerates energy, I think, faster than any other unit. But alright, Hydra being forced to pull away with a lot of his drones. But man, he's going to use queens to try to broodling every single one of these tanks. Hey, it's worked before for Hydra, so hey, why not go for it again? But it could be a bit too late. He's losing his 10 o'clock base. Well, it's 9 o'clock, 9:30, whatever. A base, that's going down. So he's going for a counterattack, knowing that there's not many troops left at home to defend this 6 o'clock. So he's going to push through here. A huge minefield to break through at the same time. And the tanks still waiting. 4 tanks waiting as he's trying to drop on top of the tanks. That is smart from Hydra. Do some Zergling bombs on top of the tanks. But Fantasy dematrixing at the front. Queen still waiting for the queen energy to broodling these tanks. Just waiting. And Hydra, I think he's going to lose everything while he waits. He has his Defiler bound at his natural 2, which is going to go down. Everything important going down from Hydra. This is not looking good for him. Even if the queens do get the broodling on those tanks. Okay, the queen's getting into position, waiting for the broodling energy. But even when he broodlings the tanks, I think that's going to be it for Hydra. He's losing way too much and doing almost nothing with that counterattack. Yeah, Queen's the right idea, but oh, here comes the Queens! What? GG! Hydra's not much of a showman. Didn't even get a single broodling on those tanks before he GG's. That's stupid. Boo! It's so rare you get to see Queens in the game, so I want to see a broodling, damn it. But Fantasy takes it with a mech build. I don't think anyone would have expected that on that map, but he took it anyway, and he gets himself into the round of 8. Rejoice, Fantasy fans! Well, it has been Nuke. I will be back pretty soon, I think tomorrow, with the final day of the round of 16. Can you handle it?